I was treated unfairly my whole life because of my perfect sister. But on my wedding day, I gave it all back. The words echoed in my head as I stared at the reflection in front of me, a woman in white. Trembling but composed, eyes glistening not with joy, but with something deeper. Something heavier. The bridal suite was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint thump of music seeping through the walls from the hall below. The scent of fresh lilies filled the room. My makeup artist had left an hour ago, my bridesmaids were waiting outside, but I'd asked for a few minutes alone. I needed it, a moment to breathe before everything began. I in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The lace veil framed a face I'd spent years hiding behind forced smiles and silent obedience. My hands, steady now, smoothed the fabric of my gown, tracing the delicate embroidery that my fiancé had insisted on choosing himself. You should feel like a queen that day, he'd said, but I never felt like a queen growing up. I was the shadow beside the throne. As I looked at my reflection, the past began to unspool, not like a story I wanted to tell, but like a wound reopening itself. When I was little, my parents used to call my sister the golden child. They didn't even try to hide it. Our Emily is a star, my mother would say proudly to relatives, resting her hand on my sister's shoulder. She just shines, doesn't she? And then her gaze would land on me, soft, dismissive. Lena's the quiet one. Quiet. Invisible. Replaceable. I was the one who cleaned up the mess after Emily's tantrums. Who got scolded when she lost her homework, who gave up toys, clothes, even birthdays because your sister deserves it more. If Emily spilled juice on the carpet, I was punished for not watching her. If she came home crying after failing a test, I was accused of making her feel bad by being too good at school. By the time I was 10, I'd learned the rule: love in my house was a currency. And I couldn't afford it. I used to believe that maybe, if I was patient enough, if I kept being good, one day they'd see me, but that day never came. When Emily turned 16, she got a car. When I turned 16, I got her old shoes. When she wanted to go out with friends, Mom gave her money. When I asked to go, Dad said, "Girls like you should stay home and learn responsibility." I stopped asking. By the time we were adults, the pattern had become so natural it felt like gravity, always pulling me down while lifting her up. The year I graduated high school, my parents sat me down in the living room. My father's tone was calm, rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Lena," he said, "we've been talking, and we can only afford to send one of you to college right now. Emily's been struggling with her grades, so she needs the opportunity more." I remember the way my mother nodded in agreement. "You're the smart one," she said, smiling as if it were a compliment. "You'll figure something out later." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Emily didn't even look sorry. She just glanced at me with that same smug expression she'd worn since childhood, the look that said, "You know how this works." That night, I cried quietly in my room, not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. But I didn't give up. I applied for scholarships in secret, staying up late after everyone went to bed. I poured everything I had into that application, every sleepless night, every unspoken dream, every scrap of dignity I'd learned to hide. When the acceptance letter arrived, I didn't tell my parents right away. I waited until Sunday lunch, when our relatives were there, the perfect audience. "I got into university," I said, sliding the letter across the table. "Full scholarship. All expenses covered." The silence that followed was delicious. My mother's smile faltered. My father's fork clattered against his plate. "And Emily?" She looked furious. "They couldn't say no. Not in front of everyone. Not when I'd done it on my own." That was the first time I'd ever won. The first time I'd seen fear, real fear, in their eyes. Years passed. I built a life far from them. Studied hard. Worked harder. Found peace in small things, morning walks, quiet coffee shops, friends who saw me for who I was. And then I met him. He was gentle where others were cruel. He listened. He didn't ask me to shrink or to stay silent. When he looked at me, I didn't feel invisible, I felt seen. When he proposed, I cried. Not because of the ring, but because it felt like an ending and a beginning all at once. I thought I'd buried my past long ago, but as the wedding drew near, the ghosts came back. And so did my parents. They wanted to be involved. To help. I should have known better. But part of me, the same small, naive part that once believed they might change, wanted to give them one last chance. That's how everything began again. And now, as I stood before the mirror in my wedding gown, I could almost hear my mother's voice echoing in my head. The same line she used whenever Emily hurt me: "Don't make a scene, Lena. Be the bigger person." But today, I wasn't going to be quiet. Today, I was done being the bigger person. The knock on the door startled me from my thoughts. My soon-to-be husband's voice came softly through the crack. "It's time, love. Are you ready?" I looked at my reflection one last time. "Yes," I whispered. "More than ever." And as I stepped toward the door, veil trailing behind me like a memory finally being released, I knew, this wasn't just a wedding. It was justice. When people look at me now, they see a woman who seems calm, maybe even soft-spoken. What they don't see is the years I spent learning to make myself small, to speak quietly, to move carefully, to exist without taking up space. I was raised in a house where love was conditional and silence was survival. My father, Richard, worked as a financial consultant, the kind of man who measured worth in numbers, reputation, and obedience. My mother, Diane, was his echo. She believed image was everything. The curtains had to match the carpet, the neighbors had to think we were perfect, and her daughters had to reflect that illusion at all times. To them, Emily wasn't just a daughter. She was an investment. The golden proof of their success. And I was the background character in their family portrait. Emily had the kind of beauty that turned heads, big blue eyes, golden hair, and that smile she used like a weapon. Even as a child, she knew how to get what she wanted. A pout, a tear, a faint sob, and suddenly, I was the one being scolded. When she broke things, I fixed them. When she lied, I apologized. When she failed, I was blamed. Our parents called it keeping the peace. I called it injustice, but I learned early on that calling something by its name didn't change it. So I smiled when I was told to, nodded when I was wronged, and kept my voice soft enough not to disturb their fantasy. My earliest memory of Emily's cruelty is of a summer afternoon when we were 8 and 10. We were playing in the yard when she pushed me into the rose bushes. I remember the sting of thorns against my skin and her laughter ringing in the air. When our mother came running out, Emily burst into tears and said, "Lena fell on her own." I tried to help. And somehow, it was me who got grounded. I spent the rest of that week cleaning the house while Emily watched TV and ate ice cream. Mom patted her hair affectionately. "She's delicate, Lena," she said. "You have to be more careful around her." That word, delicate, became the family's excuse for everything Emily did wrong. As we grew older, the roles hardened into something unshakable. Emily was the dreamer, the sensitive artist, the heart of the family. I was the responsible one, which really meant the one who carries everyone else's mess. When Emily skipped school, I covered for her. When she dated men twice her age, my parents said she was exploring her independence. When I asked for the same freedom, they said, "You're not like her, Lena. You wouldn't know how to handle it." There was no winning. If I succeeded, they ignored it. If she failed, they turned it into a family crisis I had to fix. I remember one night, at 16, sitting by my window, staring at the streetlight and wondering what it would feel like to be loved without comparison, to be loved simply because I existed. But that wasn't how our house worked. Love there was transactional. You earned it by being useful, by staying silent, by never making them uncomfortable. My father liked to remind us that family reputation comes before feelings. It was something he said often, when Emily caused a scene at school, when Mom's gossiping friends whispered about her. When I dared to question his rules, "Don't embarrass us, Lena," he'd say. "You represent this family. You should be grateful we raised you right." Grateful. It was the word that kept me chained. Grateful for the roof over my head. Grateful for being allowed to eat last at dinner. Grateful for the hand-me-down clothes, the forgotten birthdays, the apologies I never received. Grateful for nothing. By the time I reached adulthood, Emily had perfected her performance. At family gatherings, she was all charm and sweetness. The guests adored her, and my parents glowed with pride. I, meanwhile, poured coffee, served cake, and smiled until my cheeks hurt. Sometimes, relatives would lean over and whisper, "You two are so different." I'd nod and say, "Yes, we are," though what I wanted to say was, "I know, she's their masterpiece. And I'm their mistake." The truth is, I wasn't jealous of her. I didn't want her kind of attention, the kind that comes with strings attached. I just wanted fairness. Recognition. A moment where someone looked at me and said, "You did well." But in that house, praise was currency. And Emily had the monopoly. When I think back on it now, I realize my parents didn't just raise two daughters. They raised a hierarchy. Emily was the sun, bright, adored, and dangerous to look at directly. I was the shadow, always near, always necessary, but never noticed, and like all shadows, I existed only where the light hit her. When I finally left for college, on a scholarship I earned by myself, I thought I'd escaped. But the damage followed me like a ghost. Even miles away, their voices haunted every decision I made. Whenever I succeeded, I felt guilty. Whenever I failed, I heard my father's disappointment. My mother's sigh. "Emily wouldn't have done that," they used to say, even when she hadn't done anything at all. Years later, when I met the man who would become my husband, I still hesitated to introduce him to my family. He noticed it early on, the way I flinched at questions about my parents, the way I avoided phone calls from home. "You don't talk about them much," he said once. Gently, "There's not much to say," I replied. "They love my sister. That's enough for them." He didn't press. He just held my hand and said, "Then I'll love you twice as much." For the first time, I believed someone could, now, standing here on my wedding day. I think about the years I spent trying to earn affection that was never mine to begin with. Emily got their love by existing. I got their resentment by surviving, and yet, here I am, still standing, still breathing, still ready to walk down that aisle, because today isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming every part of myself they tried to erase. I still remember the night everything changed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no slammed doors, just a quiet, suffocating dinner table and a decision that felt like a knife to my chest. My father had called for a family meeting. He loved those moments where he could speak uninterrupted, while everyone else pretended his words were law. The dining room smelled like roasted chicken and polished wood. Emily sat across from me, her hair perfectly curled, her nails painted pale pink. I could already tell she knew something I didn't. My mother poured wine for her, not for me, of course, and smiled like a hostess entertaining guests rather than a mother talking to her daughters. Then my father cleared his throat. Your mother and I have been reviewing our finances, he began. And, it seems we can only afford to send one of you to college right now. The room went still. Emily didn't even look up from her plate. Dad continued, his tone calm, almost clinical. Emily's had some difficulties with her grades, and she'll need our support to get through university. Lena, you're capable, smart enough to wait a few years, maybe work first, or find other options later. I stared at him, trying to understand if I'd heard correctly. Work first? Wait a few years? I had the best grades in school. I'd been tutoring other students since I was 15. I'd done everything right, and still, it wasn't enough. Other options? I asked quietly. What options do I have if you're not helping me? He sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. You're independent, Lena. You'll figure something out. Mom reached over and touched Emily's hand, ignoring me entirely. Sweetheart, don't stress yourself. We'll handle your tuition, okay? Emily smiled softly, that practiced expression of innocence she'd worn her whole life. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. No guilt. No hesitation. Just entitlement. I sat there, frozen, while they moved on to dessert like nothing monumental had happened that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the weight of years pressing down on me, every unfair punishment. Every stolen moment. Every time they'd told me to be grateful while handing her everything I'd worked for. Somewhere between anger and despair, something inside me cracked, but not in a way that broke me. It opened me. I got up, walked to my desk, and turned on the old laptop I'd saved up for. If they weren't going to give me a chance, I'd find one myself. I started researching scholarships, full ride programs, international grants, anything that could take me out of that house. The application deadlines were close, but I refused to give up. Every night, after finishing chores and pretending to sleep, I'd sit in the dark, typing quietly while everyone else dreamed their perfect dreams. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about freedom, the kind they would never willingly give me. One afternoon, while Emily was out shopping for clothes for college, I borrowed her old printer and printed my essays. The smell of ink filled my room as I read the final line out loud. All I need is a chance, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. When I sealed the envelope, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the realization that for the first time, I was doing something for me. Weeks passed. I didn't tell a soul. Every day, I checked the mail before anyone else. My parents thought I was just helping out, but really, I was waiting for a sign that my plan had worked. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, it came. A thick envelope with the university's crest. I didn't open it right away. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, the air thick around me. I already knew, before I tore the seal, before I read the words, that this was it. We are pleased to inform you that you have been awarded a full scholarship. My knees almost gave out. I sat on the floor, laughing and crying at the same time, holding that letter like it was oxygen. For the first time in my life, I had something that was mine, something no one could take away, but I didn't tell them. Not yet. I waited for Sunday lunch, the weekly ritual where our extended family gathered at our house to admire Emily and politely ignore me. My aunts and uncles filled the dining room, talking about vacations and promotions. Emily, of course, was in the center of it all, recounting her college plans. My parents beamed with pride. I waited until the plates were cleared before standing up. I have an announcement, I said. Everyone turned to look at me, surprised that I was even speaking. I laid the envelope on the table. I got a scholarship. Full ride. Tuition, housing, everything. I'll be leaving in August. The silence was immediate and exquisite. My mother's smile froze midair. My father blinked, his fork clinking against the plate. Emily's face went pale. For once, they had no script to follow. My aunt, bless her, was the first to speak. Oh, Lena. That's incredible. Congratulations. The room erupted with polite applause, forcing my parents to join in. Wow, my uncle said, glancing at my father. You must be so proud. Both daughters in college, what an achievement. I could almost see the muscles in Dad's jaw tighten. Mom muttered something about how sudden it all was. Emily glared at me across the table, the same glare she used when we were kids. When she realized I'd beaten her at something she thought she owned, but this time, she couldn't take it back. That night, my parents didn't speak to me. The next morning, my father left a brochure for a local community college on my desk, as if to remind me where he thought I belonged. I threw it away. When I finally packed my bags that summer, my mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You think you're better than us now?" she asked coldly. I zipped the suitcase shut. "No," I said softly. "Just different." And for the first time, I meant it. When the train pulled out of the station, I watched the town fade into the horizon. My reflection in the window looked calm, almost peaceful. Behind me, my old life was shrinking, smaller and smaller, until it disappeared, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. Years passed. Time had a strange way of healing things, or at least, dulling the edges. After college, I built a quiet life for myself. I moved to the city, started a career in design, and learned to stop waiting for my parents' approval. For a while, I almost believed I'd left it all behind. Then I met Adam. He wasn't loud or flashy, just kind in the quietest ways. The first time we talked, he noticed how I stirred my coffee counterclockwise and teased that I was reversing time. We laughed. And something in me softened, something I thought had died years ago. We dated for 3 years before he proposed on a rainy afternoon in our apartment kitchen. There were no grand gestures, just the sound of rain against the window and the question that changed everything: will you build a life with me, on our terms, not anyone else's? I said yes. For the first time in my life, the word family didn't sound like a prison. When the engagement news spread, my phone lit up with a message I hadn't seen in years. "Mom, your father and I would like to meet Adam. It's only proper before the wedding." Proper. That word again, always used when they wanted control disguised as tradition. I hesitated, but Adam insisted. "If we want peace, we should give them a chance to show who they really are." He was right. We arranged a dinner at a quiet restaurant near the coast. The same town I'd once sworn never to return to. The moment we arrived, my parents were already seated, stiff postures, polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Emily sat beside them, looking radiant as ever, in a way that felt intentional. "Lena," Mom said, her voice dripping with sugar. "You look different. More mature." "Thank you," I replied evenly. Dad cleared his throat. "Adam, we've heard a lot about you. Must be quite a man to handle our little Lena." Adam smiled easily. "She handles herself just fine." The conversation began pleasant enough, old stories, fake laughter, Emily chiming in with little reminders of my rebellious teenage years. Then came the real reason we were there. Mom set down her fork delicately. "So, about the wedding?" I felt Adam tense beside me. Dad leaned forward. "We understand weddings can be expensive. Your mother and I are willing to help cover the costs, on one small condition." I looked up. "What condition?" Mom smiled as if she were announcing a charitable act. "We think it would be meaningful for Emily to walk first in the ceremony. You know, to let her experience that feeling before her younger sister. She hasn't had her chance yet, poor thing." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Emily just tilted her head, feigning modesty. "It's not a big deal. I just want to wear something nice and maybe hold a bouquet. It would make Mom happy." Dad added, "It's just symbolic. Think of it as sharing the moment. You're both our daughters, after all." I could barely breathe. Adam's hand brushed against mine under the table. "Steady and calm." He said politely, "That's an unusual request." Mom chuckled. "You'll understand when you have children. Fairness matters less than keeping the family balanced." Balanced. The word hit me like a slap. I sat there, nodding mechanically, while inside, every childhood memory replayed like a cruel movie. All the times they'd chosen her. All the times they'd told me to understand, to wait, to give up. They hadn't changed. Not one bit. When dinner ended, we exchanged the usual hollow hugs. I thought Adam would be furious once we got in the car, but he wasn't. He just drove in silence for a while before saying, "They think they still own you. Maybe it's time we teach them they don't." He told me he had recorded the entire conversation. Every word. Every manipulation. At first, I was shocked, then relieved. For years, I had no proof of what they were. Now, I had everything. Over the next few weeks, we played along. Mom sent endless messages about planning the joint ceremony. Emily texted me pictures of white gowns, writing, "I think this one suits both of us." I responded with polite emojis. While Adam and I met with the real planner, one they didn't know about. Every decision we made, the venue, the decor, the guest list, was intentional. We invited their friends, their coworkers, everyone whose opinion they valued. Adam smiled when he handed me the final list. "If they want a performance, we'll give them one, just not the one they expect." In the weeks leading up to the wedding, my parents bragged to everyone about their two brides event. Emily even posted a countdown on social media, writing, "Soon to be a magical day for me and my baby sister, #double brides." The comments were full of admiration and confusion. People praised their unique bond. I read every post with quiet satisfaction. Let them dig their own grave, one caption at a time. The night before the wedding, Adam found me sitting by the window, unable to sleep. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked softly. I turned to him, my voice steady. "For once, I want them to feel what I felt, powerless, humiliated, and seen for who they really are." He nodded. "Then tomorrow, we finish it." When dawn broke, the sky was a pale gold, and I felt strangely calm. It wasn't fear anymore. It was closure waiting to happen, because after a lifetime of being silenced, I was finally ready to speak, not with words, but with truth, and I would do it wearing white. The wedding morning was silent, almost unnaturally so. No birds, no noise, just the faint hum of the sea breeze outside the hotel windows. I stood before the mirror in my white gown, fingers trembling against the lace. For a moment, I saw a stranger, calm, steady, untouchable. Adam came up behind me, fixing his tie. "They're here," he said quietly. I nodded. "Then it's time." Outside, my parents arrived in their usual fashion, late, loud, and entitled. Emily followed, radiant in her own white dress, carrying a bouquet so large it nearly swallowed her. "Doesn't she look beautiful?" Mom gushed to the coordinator. "She's the older sister, after all. It's only right that she walks first." The coordinator, actually one of Adam's hired team, smiled politely. "Of course, ma'am. Please wait here while we confirm the schedule." Emily twirled once in front of the mirror in the lobby, admiring herself. "It feels so good to finally have my moment," she said. "I deserve this." Dad patted her shoulder proudly. "You both do. But especially you, sweetheart." Meanwhile, inside the ballroom, everything gleamed under soft golden lights. Guests were seated. The music was playing softly. Adam adjusted his cufflinks, whispering to me, "They're waiting outside." I took a slow breath. Let them. The plan was simple, and cruelly poetic. Only one bride would enter that aisle. Outside, things began to unravel. The head of security, a tall man in a dark suit, approached my parents and Emily. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his tone formal. "We can't allow entry at the moment." Mom frowned. "What do you mean? We're the bride's family." "Yes, ma'am. But the bride has already entered." Emily blinked. "That's impossible. I'm the bride." The man didn't flinch. "According to the guest list and security clearance, there's only one bride registered, Ms. Lena Walker." Her face froze, and then turned a dangerous shade of red. Inside the hall, the doors opened. The music swelled, soft piano mixed with the sound of gentle waves. I stepped forward, veil brushing against my shoulders, every heartbeat louder than the last. People rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. For the first time in my life, every eye was on me, and I wasn't invisible anymore. Outside, chaos erupted. Emily shoved the security guard. "Let me in. This is my wedding too." Mom screamed, "This is outrageous. My daughter planned this whole thing." Dad shouted, "Where's the manager? We paid for this." The guard stood unmoved. "Sir, all expenses were covered by Mr. Adam Walker. The family's contribution is noted as a gift, listed under your name." Their expressions twisted. They finally realized what had happened. They had paid for everything, thinking they were in control. Emily's voice cracked. "She tricked us. That bitch tricked us." Inside, the vows began. Adam took my hands. "You've waited your whole life to be free," he whispered. "Today, you are." Tears burned in my eyes as I smiled. "And I'll never give it back." We exchanged vows quietly. The chaos outside fading into nothing but muffled noise. Suddenly, a commotion echoed through the doors, shouting. The sound of heels clacking against marble. Emily burst in. Her makeup streaked, dress torn from running. "Stop this!" she screamed. "She doesn't deserve this. This was supposed to be my moment." The crowd gasped. Cameras turned. I turned slowly to face her. For the first time, I didn't feel small. "Emily," I said softly, "you've had every moment your whole life. This one is mine." Mom ran in behind her, clutching her purse, yelling, "Lena, how could you embarrass us like this?" Dad pointed a shaking finger. "You'll regret this. Everyone will know what kind of ungrateful daughter you are." Adam stepped forward, calm as ever. "Everyone already knows. In fact." He pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. The speakers around the room crackled, then played the recording from the dinner weeks ago. "We just want Emily to walk first. It's only fair she feels special before her little sister. We'll pay for everything, it's our gift." Gasps filled the room. Guests exchanged looks of horror. One of my relatives whispered, "They said that?" Mom went pale. Emily covered her ears, muttering, "Turn it off, turn it off. But Adam didn't stop. Fairness matters less than keeping the family balanced, Mom's voice echoed through the hall, the truth hung in the air like smoke. I looked at them one last time, the people who taught me shame. Who turned love into a weapon, then I turned away, the officiant cleared his throat gently. Shall we continue? Yes, I said, my voice clear and steady. Please. Adam smiled at me, eyes soft. You look free. I am, I whispered. As we kissed, the guests clapped. But all I could hear was the sound of the ocean outside, endless. Calm, and mind up. By the time the ceremony ended, my parents and sister were gone. No more shouting. No more control. Just silence, and peace, the kind of peace that feels like victory. The wedding night was calm, almost eerily so. After all the chaos, all the shouting, all the humiliation that played out in front of everyone, there was just silence. Peaceful, golden silence. Adam and I sat on the balcony of our hotel room, overlooking the city lights. My veil lay across his lap. His tie was gone. For the first time, I could breathe without waiting for someone to yell at me for existing. He poured 2 glasses of champagne and handed me one. To peace, he said softly. I smiled, clinking my glass against his. To finally being free. We didn't talk much after that, we didn't have to. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was healing. It was the sound of 2 people who had survived something cruel and come out clean on the other side. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages, dozens of missed calls. My mother's name. My father's. Emily's. The first text came in before I could even finish reading the headlines about our wedding that had already spread online. You humiliated this family. You'll regret this. You're no longer our daughter. Then another, from Emily, you ruined my life. He tricked me, and you let him. I scrolled through them all without emotion. It felt like reading messages from strangers. Adam walked over, phone in hand, eyebrows raised. You're trending, he said, half amused, half worried. I blinked. Trending? He showed me the post. Someone from the wedding had uploaded the audio recording. From the ceremony, the part where my parents demanded Emily walk. First in my wedding, and it had gone viral on a local gossip forum, thousands of comments. Hundreds of strangers defending me, calling it the ultimate revenge story. I should have felt embarrassed, but instead, I felt seen. For once, people believed me. 2 days later, my parents tried one last desperate move. They called Adam directly. He put the call on speaker. Mom's voice came through, trembling, fake sweet. Adam, dear, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were only trying to make things fair. You know how emotional weddings can be. Adam smiled coldly. You tried to humiliate your daughter on her wedding day. That's not emotional, that's cruel. Dad cut in sharply. You think you're better than us? You'll see how far she gets without her family. Adam chuckled, leaning back. She doesn't need a family that treats her like a mistake. She has one now. And then he hung up. That was the last time they ever heard from us directly. A week later, Emily sent me a string of angry voice messages, her tone flipped between rage and tears. I loved him first. You always wanted to steal everything from me. He's just like you, a liar. Adam shook his head as he listened. She's spiraling. Let her, I said quietly. She's been in control her whole life. Maybe now she'll finally have to face herself. We didn't block her immediately. Instead, Adam uploaded screenshots of her messages, along with the voice clips, to the family group chat, the same one where everyone had congratulated my parents the week before. The silence that followed was deafening. Within minutes, my uncle sent a single message, you two deserve each other, and I mean that as a compliment. No one else replied. A month passed. Then too. We moved into a small apartment by the lake. Just outside the city. I began working again, teaching art to children at a local community center. On my first day, one of the little girls, about 6 years old, came up to me with paint on her cheeks and said, you look like a princess, but a real one, not the fake kind. I laughed until I cried because somehow, that tiny voice made me realize something. I had been chasing my parents' approval my whole life, but I didn't need it. I had already built something better. A life that was quiet, gentle, and mine. Sometimes I still dream about that day, the chaos outside the ballroom, my mother's face twisting in anger, my sister's scream echoing down the hall, but in the dream, it doesn't scare me. It just fades, like a movie I've already watched too many times. The past no longer defines me. One evening, Adam and I took a walk by the lake. The sun was setting, turning the water gold. He slipped his hand into mine. Would you do it all again? I thought for a moment. Every single part, I said. Even the pain. Because it brought me here. He smiled softly. You know, I didn't fall in love with you because you were broken. I know, I said, smiling back. You fell in love with me because I wasn't, not anymore. When we got home, I opened my old photo box, the one from my childhood. Pictures of Emily smiling, my parents beaming beside her. And then, me, small, quiet, standing slightly out of frame. I took that one picture and tore it in half, then I took a brush, dipped it in white paint, and covered the old image until it was blanked out a clean slate. That night, I wrote a letter I'd never send. You don't own me anymore. You never did. You just made me strong enough to find out who I really am. The next morning, I woke up early, opened the window, and let the sunlight in. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I was simply living, and that was enough. It's been a year since the wedding. A year since I walked down that aisle, leaving behind everything that used to hurt me. Sometimes, when I water the small garden on our balcony, I think about how different my life is now. There are no raised voices, no silent dinners, no endless comparisons. Just quiet mornings, a warm cup of coffee, and sunlight spilling through the curtains. Adam leaves early for work, but he always kisses my forehead before he goes, a simple, gentle act that still feels foreign to me. Not because I don't believe it, but because I'm still learning what it means to be loved without conditions. Every weekend, I teach art classes at the community center. My students are loud, messy, and beautifully imperfect. They paint the sky green and the ocean red. And when I ask why, they shrug and say, because that's how I see it. I envy them sometimes, the freedom to exist without explanation. One day, a little girl stayed behind after class. She had long brown hair and big, curious eyes. She looked up at me and asked, Miss Lena, do grown-ups ever get scared? Her question caught me off guard. I knelt beside her and said, all the time. But we learn how to walk even when we're scared. She nodded, like she understood. Then she hugged me tightly and whispered, then you're very brave. I didn't cry then, not until I got home. Because for the first time in my life, someone saw me not as weak or less than, but as brave. A few months ago, I received a letter from my parents. It wasn't an apology, of course it wasn't. It was short, cold, almost bureaucratic. They said Emily wasn't doing well. That she had lost her job, that she was emotionally unstable, and that maybe I should reach out, since families should stick together. I stared at that line for a long time. Families should stick together. I used to believe that, even when it destroyed me. But now, I know the truth. Blood isn't love, and silence isn't peace. I didn't reply. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer with the others, and closed it for good. Last week, I painted something new, a large canvas, taller than me. It was a woman standing in front of a mirror, her reflection smiling back. The woman's dress was white, but not a wedding gown. It was simple, flowing, alive, like she had chosen it herself. When I finished, I realized it was the first time I had ever painted myself. Not the girl they used to break, not the daughter they used to ignore, but the woman I had become. I titled it, Reclaimed. Adam asked if I wanted to sell it. I said no. It wasn't meant for anyone else. It was my reminder that I had survived, and that survival had turned into life. Sometimes, on quiet nights, Adam and I sit by the lake and talk about the future, about maybe having children one day. The idea used to scare me. I was terrified of becoming like my parents, of repeating the same patterns. But Adam always says, we don't inherit cruelty, Lena. We choose kindness. He's right. The past doesn't dictate who I am anymore. I think that's what healing really is, not pretending the pain never happened, but refusing to let it define you. Every now and then, Emily's name still appears on my phone, a new number, a different account. Her messages are always the same, blame, bitterness, self-pity. I used to feel sorry for her. Now, I just wish her peace, because I finally understand, hurting people hurt others, and if I keep letting that pain touch me, it wins. And I've already won. One morning, I woke up early to catch the sunrise. The lake was still, painted in gold. Birds were gliding just above the water. I stood there barefoot on the balcony, the air cool against my skin. For a second, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath with me, and I thought, maybe this is what freedom feels like. Not the grand kind, not the movie kind, but the quiet, steady freedom of knowing that no one owns your happiness anymore. Later that day, while sorting through old photos, I found one of Emily and me as kids. We were sitting on the beach outside our grandparents' house, the same house where everything had begun. Emily was smiling at the camera, radiant as always. I was in the background, looking down at the sand. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I turned it over and wrote a single line on the back. She took the spotlight. I found the light. And I smiled. People often ask if I ever miss my family. The truth is, I miss the idea of them. The version I wished I had. But not the reality, because the reality was built on conditions, love that had to be earned, worth that had to be proven. And now, I know I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I belong to myself. As the sun set that evening, Adam came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. I leaned back against him, my eyes on the fading horizon. About how far I've come, I whispered. And how it all started with pain I thought would never end. He kissed the side of my head and said softly, you turned pain into art, Lena. Into life. And maybe that's the best ending I could ever ask for, because in the end, I realized something simple, something powerful. They once made me believe I didn't deserve happiness. But today, I know I was always enough.